Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim Jacquet.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Today I have gospel recording artist Cynthia Simons. She's going to be on the call shortly. In the meantime, what we're going to do is going to take a station break and come back and talk about her life, her career, her passion, her energy, her business. Be back in a moment. Tim Jacquet with the Thank you for listening. We're going to take a station break real quick and play a track. Then we probably getting you to listen to the Core Business Show. Here's a word from my sponsor.
You're listening to the Core Business Show, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. Apple Capital Group in Jacksonville, Florida, is a commercial lender that specializes in asset-based loans, equipment leasing and financing, invoice financing, commercial real estate loans, and asset-based financing in the U.S. and Canada. Apple Capital Group is a direct lender that lends on their private equity investment portfolio. 90% of most loans are decided within 2 hours, and vendor funding within 24 hours after documents are completed, with a one-page application. No slow no's, just a quick decision and a fast yes. To get more information about lending from Apple Capital Group, call 866-611-7457. That's 866-611-7457 to speak with one of our loan specialists. Or visit us right now at applecapitalgroup.com. Welcome back to the Core. Once again, here's Tim Jacquet.
Again, Tim Jacquet, your host with the Core Business Show. We're going to play a track by a friend of mine named Joe Sample, a famous jazz musician. He's back in Houston, Texas, outside of Houston, Texas, in Clear Lake. So we're going to play, and we'll be back in a moment with recording artist Cynthia Simons. That was Soul Shadow with Joe Sample. So I'm going to go ahead and play a track for Cynthia Simons called Thankful, and we'll be back in a moment. Well, welcome back to the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Well, Cynthia, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here.
Thank you. I guess to begin with, our listeners love to hear personal stories of the composer, the artist themselves, and versus reading something out aloud. So if you might take a moment and tell us about yourself. How did you get started?
Well, Tim, I've been singing since I was a child. I come from a very talented family. My mom, I have 11 siblings, all of which are very talented musically, and we were all raised in a home where music was a major part of our lives. So it's been a part of my life since the beginning.
Wow. So 11? Are you in the middle, or are you at the beginning or the end?
Actually in the middle. I am the middle child, and it was an amazing position because being the middle child, sometimes you get the bulk of the good and sometimes the bulk of the bad, because with so many siblings, it was very difficult. My mom was a stay-home mom, and my dad was, I think, one of the greatest men I've ever met in my life. He cared for us in such a way that we never felt that we missed out on anything.
Wow, 11. Well, that's amazing. And you're in the middle. And out of that, to try to get a musical voice, and you mentioned that a lot of you people are always musical. How did you get your musical voice? Because I know with 11 siblings across the board, well, you're competing with 10 to rise above that and have your voice. How did you do that?
Well, it was very easy, I think, because my mother, when we were being raised in our home, we were raised in a very strong Christian-based home. So the only type of music that we were allowed to listen to was gospel music. We were able to listen to gospel music, and on the other hand, my dad was a country and western guy. So we had our choice from James Cleveland versus Buck Owens. So it took some time for me to try to determine my own voice. As I grew older, I became exposed to R&B, and we were brought up listening to soul music. So for me, as I grew older, soul music, it ventured off to be Barbra Streisand or Bonnie Raitt or Aretha Franklin. I just started to really love just good music versus just gospel music. I started to just be impressed with just great music.
Wow. So your background, Christian family, what type of religion you guys was raised in? And did that really, what kind?
It's also Church of God in Christ, which I'm still
Okay.
affiliated with. But the one thing, when you're growing up as a child, you really can't define your religion. My mother and father, they never tried to raise us as specific. They just raised us as Christians, just people that believe in God. And since I was a child, I've always based my religion off of my relationship with God versus an organization. Because I find that sometimes, even in organizations, you'll experience things that are not God-like. But if you have a strong foundation and a relationship with the God of your salvation, it enables you to never waver in believing and trusting the God of your salvation.
Absolutely. Kind of give us the story. You mentioned Buck Owens, and of course, the Pentecostal church had an influence on your style. Who did you actually listen to as a kid growing up that you really gravitate towards?
As a kid growing up, I listened a lot of Aretha Franklin. I listened to Shirley C. as a kid, but in my teens, I started to listen to Walter and Edwin Hawkins, Andre Crouch, some of the pioneers. Gospel started off very traditional, but as the demand for gospel grew, I believe people like Andre Crouch was astronomical reason why the direction for gospel changed. And with Walter and Edwin Hawkins, it exploded the industry and forced people to accept another sound and another interpretation of the word and song. So I was heavily influenced by those two artists. And then as I started to travel around, I started to travel with Lonnie Morgan, Voices and Praise, and just exposed to all different types of gospel. I started to form my own sound and my own feeling about the messages that I wanted to deliver.
Wow. So during this path, when you growing up as a youth, were you involved in the choirs or at school and at church?
Anytime there was an opportunity for me to sing, I was one of those children that would never shut up singing. I could remember in a household of 11 siblings, at some point my mother wanted some type of peace of mind. And my siblings, they laugh at me now because they can remember I would still be found somewhere humming in a corner, humming something or scribbling something musically. If it was the bass guitar or the drums or the piano, we never had the funds to be able to send us to any type of classes to learn those talents. So my mom and dad, they just bought the instruments and set them in the house. And I was the kid that was always running around just trying to figure out how the bass worked or the drums or the piano. So yeah, it was interesting because the more they told me to be quiet, the more I...
Wow. So during that time, you learning your voice as a person, do you remember your first solo?
I absolutely do. It was a song by Andre Crouch. It was called This Moment, and it was sang by Danabelle. And it was a song that I used to sing to my father all the time. My father loved, we pretty much borderline worshiped my dad. And so whenever I was in his presence, I always wanted to please him. And I knew that he loved our singing. And so I would always sing this song to my dad, which would make him smile. And to this day, it's on record as his favorite song.
Wow. Can you give us a sample on how that song goes?
It says, Lord, I waited long enough. I hear your spirit talking to me. Now I open up the door. Like nothing I can do has ever brought me any satisfaction. So I open up my heart to you. Have a moment like this before. Never before ever been a moment with you. And it goes,
wow.
on. But yeah, that's pretty much the logistics of the song.
Wow. So as you came to your first solo and you came up through high school and so forth, when did you know that this now this is going to be your life, your ministry, your focus? When did that set in your mind? Was that from an early age or did it set later in life?
It's kind of difficult to try and position when that moment happened in my mind because, like I said, from a child, I was surrounded by music. So music was not something that I had to decide on whether or not I would do. It was just a part of the fabric of my life. As it relates to the ministry, I think that my ministry is more powerful than my music. My ministry was birthed out of my experiences. So even though I've always had a song, my experiences gave me the ministry. And so I believe that as I started to revisit my music and I would interpret the songs that God would place in my spirit, they were all birthed out of my experiences. For instance, the title of this album is called Thankful. The title speaks of my experience and my life because that's just who I am. When there's a song on there that says, sit back and relax and know that God has gotten you. That song was written in the most horrific time of my life when I had lost my dad and my brother to cancer. So every single song on this project, the ones that I wrote, believe it or not, Thankful was written when I was 14 years old. The title is the one that I wrote with Daryl, that I sing along with Daryl Coley. That song was actually written when I was 14. So it's amazing how God will give you a message before you have actually walked out the experience. So I look back now on that song and say, how could I have even penned such a song? How could I experience that in my mind? But it's amazing about how God is when he has picked you from the foundation of your life and allows you to walk out that experience. And now I'm singing that ministry.
How your music come to you? I know you mentioned that it comes through many parts of your life. Does it come to you like a thought in the middle of the night or a thought in the middle of the day or just in pieces?
It's amazing because sometimes for me, my music comes out of painful experiences. And so a lot of times I'm not one that has this, oh, I come to you, oh, Father God. I really have chats with you. I mean, sometimes they're arguments. Sometimes they're just sobbing. Why me? Why me? And my music comes from his replies to me. Most of the time, it's out of what he tells me. And when he speaks to me and I get a solid answer, I interpret that through my music. It's very difficult to tell somebody to sit back and relax when you have a brother. My brother was actually in prison at the time and he was dying with lung cancer. And I was traveling back and forth from Los Angeles to San Francisco every weekend. So out of me being just overwhelmed at it all, for God to give me a message to sit back and relax, it's kind of difficult. But when you live through the experience and the process, it's a powerful song. And the lyrics speaks to the experience. And I just believe that I've heard from so many people that the song has really touched and given them the ability to sit back and relax in some of the most difficult times. I'm not surprised by that response because I understand where the song and the message was birthed, the experience that it was birthed out of.
When you talk about God is silent, he's not always speaking to people in a sense. And sometimes when he speaks, it's when you're on, Bishop Jakes always mentions, you're on the path. But when you have these moments of grief and sorrow and pain and you birth your song, how do you keep going? Because sometimes you don't hear anything, no feedback right away. Sometimes it may be a moment later, it might be a week, it might be a month. How do you personally, when there's silence and you haven't got that answer yet or the reply yet, how do you actually cope with that and move forward as you're birthing your song?
Well, for me, and I hate to sound condescending to the experiences and the difficult experiences that people that they go through, but for me, I have to say that it has now become, in my walk now, it has become easy. And when I say easy is not the trials, easy is not the temptations. What is easy is waiting on God. Because based on my experiences with him, I know his silence, whether he is silent or whether he is speaking loud. I realize now that the God of my salvation, he loves me so much that he would not allow anything to harm me. He would not allow anything that his thoughts for me are of good and not evil. So even sometimes when I do not understand, I just trust his love for me. It's really that basic. There are things that I'm encountering even now today that I really don't understand God's plan. Imagine having 11 siblings and every single illness that I've had, from cancer to stroke to heart attack to cardiomyopathy, everything. I used to question God and say, God, why would you allow all of this sickness in one body? And he reminded me that he is the God of my salvation. And he also reminded me that he has healed me from every single illness that I've ever encountered. So when you have those type of experiences with God, you learn to just trust. A lot of times we don't understand. His plans and his thoughts and his ways are so different than ours. But what I do know is that I trust him with my life.
Wow. How do you tell a person? There's always this sense of some churches, there is a performance in a ministry. What advice do you tell a person as they come up how to discern your ministry versus a performance?
Whenever I'm on any platform or on any stage, or even just this meeting with you, this interview with you, it's never ever about me. It's never ever about me getting bigger or gaining more fans or a bigger crowd or whatever, because God has so wonderfully provided for me. And when I say provided, I have everything that I need. And so I think a lot of times early on, you worry about impressing and making sure that you're doing the runs you need to do and making sure your voice is this. But I would say to any artist, understand your ministry, understand your message, and deliver it. Deliver it the same way you would deliver it to one as though you would deliver it to millions. And if whatever the message is God has given you, I think that a lot of times there's a cliche in gospel that says, when you find something that works, work it. I disagree with that. I believe that when you find the message that God has given to you, then you deliver that and that only. Because it's very easy to try and interpret somebody else's message, but nobody can be you. And I believe that God will give you something specific to tell the body versus having to repeat something that you've heard or seen and try and deliver that message. I think you just need to stay true to your gift and your ministry.
Wow. Describe your style. Each person have a particular style, and your style is unique. Kind of tell us, what is your style? Because I'm listening to some of the tracks that you have. Tell us your style.
That's kind of hard to say because I just love really good music. It's kind of difficult for me to say this is my style of music. On this project, there's contemporary gospel, there's traditional gospel, there's a little bit of classical, there's a little bit of jazz. I mean, it's kind of hard to describe. I couldn't say that I'm a traditional gospel singer. I'm just a gospel singer. If I had to I know people they've always told me that I sound a little bit like Oleta Adams, or I sound a little bit like this person or that person. Again, my music is birthed out of the experiences I've had. You know, you listen to good music and you listen to good singers, and you can't help but try and borrow a little bit of their greatness.
Absolutely. I've noticed on one of the tracks is Say a Little Prayer, and I remember this song from the late 60s by Dionne Warwick, and then it came back. I think Aretha Franklin sung it. What inspired you to put this particular song? I mean, it goes, well, excellent addition of this particular piece. And it shows a lot of diversity. How did you come about reaching back in the past to pull one of these classics?
With you, Say a Little Prayer was a song that I've always loved Aretha Franklin, and I was introduced with that song by Aretha Franklin. I have heard Dionne Warwick's version, but Aretha Franklin's version just really spoke to my heart. And I remember when I was young, I used to catch the bus, and I would just listening to that song. It was just a song that I just kind of fell in love with. And then my experience became greater with God, I started to say, wow, this is pretty much what I do in the morning. I get up, I put my makeup on, and while I'm putting my makeup on, I'm saying a little prayer. And then I thought, wow, this would be a great message. And so there was a producer by the name of Stephen Tillman, Fresh Tillman. He came and he said, you know what? We can put a really nice Michael Jackson spin on this. This is a really nice song, Cynthia. And so we went into the studio and came out with Magic. I simply love that song. And I just think that it's a powerful message.
Wow. Well, going back to your music, your style, as you move towards your career and you decide you you have a recording contract, what was that experience like, and how did you manage? Now you step in a different league. Now you have a recording contract. How did you manage all those components of a publicist, a manager, a record contract? So you have all these entities going on. Did someone advise you what steps to take and what steps to avoid?
Well, the thing for me is I was pretty blessed in that respect that I've been in the industry for a long time. I used to sing, travel, and sing with the Bob Hope USO show. I used to perform and travel a lot with the Edwin Hawkins Music and Art Seminar. So I was able and introduced to everybody in the industry, from Donnie McClurkin to Fred Hammond to just pretty much everybody. And so I was very close and parallel with their lives. So the music industry, it was not a mystery to me. The mystery was what portion of it did I want to be a part of. At the time, I was free before having my children. I was free to pretty much freelance and do and go wherever I wanted to. Once I had my children, my priority was being a mom. As they grew older and now they're in college, the Lord opened up a amazing door for me to not only sing, but go into acting. And so I met Dr. Holly Davis Carter from the Releve Entertainment Group. And before I knew it, there was a contract on the table. And I have to be honest, I consult God about everything. So I don't put a lot of trust in processes or even sometimes in people, but I have all my trust in God. And like I said, we chat about everything. So
wow.
I asked him about the direction. I asked him to give me peace for everything that I do. And then I do have mentors that I can go to and talk to as it relates to the contracts, the business side of this industry.
Tell us about working with Daryl Coley on your track. Is it Thankful?
Yes, Daryl is an amazing artist. I think Daryl is one of the most talented male vocalists that I've ever met in my life. I mean, I love Donnie McClurkin. I love Walter Hawkins. I love good music. But Daryl Coley does something with his voice that I've never heard anybody do. And the control that he has is just amazing. I have to tell you, I was so honored to have Daryl in on this project. But it was amazing watching him in the studio. I mean, it took me forever to lock down my portion of the song. It was amazing to see Daryl walk into the studio, tell him to pull up the track and nail his portion in one take. So
wow.
I was just in awe of his ability to just walk in and deliver. But yes, that was an amazing experience, and that's one that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
Did he give you any advice for the future?
Daryl and I have been friends for a long time. So Daryl is the type that he's very direct. And so he would always remind me, Cynthia, just be you. Just do you. Don't worry about the industry. Don't worry about the record sales. Don't worry about the performances. Just be you. Follow God's leading, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
In closing, if there's a song, well, one question regarding what advice do you give someone going in this particular industry who's starting out young? What advice will you give them? And lastly, if there's a song that speaks to you, that is about you, that describes you, what song will that be?
To answer your first question, the advice that I would give to anyone, make sure that their music is more than just a song. Make sure, because this industry can, as any industry or any endeavor, can be cruel, because there's always something that they will have to encounter. And they need to make sure that this is what God has planned for them. This is not just something they decided, this is what I want to do. They really need to seek God and make sure that their ministry lines up with. And then secondly, there's actually 2 songs on the album. The single right now is called I Am God. That speaks volumes for where my peace comes from, knowing that our God is on the throne, and as long as he's there, I'm good every day that I wake up. But if you want to understand specifically how I feel about this music and the ministry that God has placed in my life, Cynthia's song is a song that I said speaks volumes for who I am and why I am.
Wow, it's powerful. Cynthia, thank you for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the very best on your album.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Shaka. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Again, it's been another production of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim JK, your host. You can download this episode on iTunes or Blog Talk Radio. Everybody take care. Have a great day. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim JK. For a free quote on equipment leasing and financing, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. And fill out the information to receive your free quote. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. Thanks again for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim JK.